The book I chose to do for my read aloud is called The Giver. It's by Lois Lowry. She's a winner of the Newbery Medal, and this isn't the exact cover that normally is on the book, but since it is now a major motion picture, this is the cover that it is. The book was copyrighted in 1993, and the publishing company is by Houghton Mifflin Books for Children, and since it is a chapter book, there is no pictures, so I will not be showing the pictures during this video. I think the audience appropriate age is going to be 9 and above because it is a different kind of, the concepts behind the book are kind of difficult for I think younger children, and there are no pictures like I said before, so the children have to do all their imaginary in their heads. But it is a good book, and I think children do need to read it because it explains a different kind of society. There are no charts, lists, or maps in this, but I think with the amount of characters that we're going to meet within the story, it would be a good idea for children to make a list of all the characters and who they are in the book or what they represent, just so they can keep an idea, and then maybe you can use it as a reference guide later when there's even more characters introduced, a map. I think it would be rather cool for children to use their imagination to picture what they think this community is going to look like, just because the ideas I get from my head are not a community that would represent like America or something like that today. So I think it'd be cool for them to design their own map. And so today I'm going to be reading chapter 1. It was almost December, and Jonas was beginning to be frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant that deep, sickening feeling of something terrible about to happen. Frightened was the way he felt a year ago when an unidentified aircraft had overflown the community twice. He had seen it both times. Squinting toward the sky, he had seen the sleek jet, almost a blur at its high speed, go past, and then a second later heard the blast of sound that followed. And one more time, a moment later, from the opposite direction, the same plane. At first, he had only been fascinated. He had never seen an aircraft so close, for it was against the rules for pilots to fly over the community. Occasionally when supplies were delivered by cargo planes to the landing field across the river, the children rode their bicycles to the riverbank and watched, intrigued, the unloading and then the takeoff directed to the west, always away from the community. But the aircraft a year ago had been different. It was not a squat, fat-bellied cargo plane, but a needle-nosed single pilot jet. Jonas, looking around anxiously, had seen others, adults, as well as children, stop what they were doing and wait, confused, for an explanation of a frightening event. Then all the citizens had been ordered to go into the nearest building and stay there, immediately. The rasping voice through the speakers had said, "Leave your bicycles where they are." Instantly, obediently, Jonas had dropped his bike on the side of the path behind his family dwelling. He had run indoors and stayed there alone. His parents were both at work, and his little sister Lily was at the child care center where she spent her after-school hours. Looking through the front window, he had seen no people, none of the busy afternoon crew of the street cleaners, landscape workers, and food delivery people, who usually populate the community at that time of day. He saw only the abandoned bikes here and there on their sides. An upturned wheel on one was still revolving slowly. He had been frightened then. The sense of his own community silent, waiting, had made his stomach churn. He had trembled. But it had been nothing. Within minutes the speakers had crackled again, and the voice, reassuring now, and less urgent, had explained a pilot in training had misread his navigational instructions and made a wrong turn. Desperately the pilot had been trying to make his way back before his error was noticed. "Needless to say, he will be released," the voice had said, followed by silence. There was an ironic tone to that final message, as if the speaker found it amusing, and Jonas had smiled a little, though he knew what a grim statement it had been. For a contributing citizen to be released from the community was a final decision, a terrible punishment, an overwhelming statement, a failure. Even the children were scolded if they could use the term lightly at play, jeering at a teammate who missed a catch or stumbled in a race. Jonas had done it once. He had shouted at his best friend, "That's it, Asher! You're released!" When Asher's clumsy arrow had lost a match for his team, he had been taken aside for a brief and serious talk by the coach, had hung his head with guilt and embarrassment, and apologized to Asher after the game. Now thinking about the feeling of fear as he pedaled home along the river path, he'd remember that moment of palpable stomach-striking terror when the aircraft had streaked above. It was not that he had feeling of now, with December approaching. He searched for the right word to describe his own feeling. Jonas was careful about his language, not like his friend Asher, who talked too fast and mixed things up, scrambling words and phrases until they were barely recognizable. And, often very funny. Jonas grinned, remembering that morning that Asher had dashed in the classroom, late as usual, arriving breathlessly in the middle of the chanting of the morning anthem. When the class took their seats at the conclusion of the patriotic hymn, Asher remained standing to make his public apology, as was required. "I apologize for inconveniencing my learning community." Asher ran through the standard apology phrase rapidly, still catching his breath. The instructor in the class waited patiently for his explanation. The students had all been grinning, because they listened to Asher's explanation so many times before. "I left home at the correct time, but when I was riding along near the hatchery, the crew had been separating some salmon. I guess I just got distraught watching them. I apologize to my classmates," Asher concluded. He smoothed his rumpled tunic and sat down. "We accept your apology, Asher," the class recited to the standard response in unison. Many of the children were biting their lips to keep from laughing. "I accept your apology, Asher," the instructor said. He was smiling. "And I thank you because once again you have provided an opportunity for a lesson in language." Distraught is too strong of an adjective to describe salmon viewing. He turned and wrote "distraught" on the instructional board. Beside it he wrote "distracted." Jonas, nearing his home now, smiled at the recollection. Thinking still as he wheeled his bike into the narrow port beside the door, he realized that frightened was the wrong word to describe his feelings now. That December was almost here. It was too strong of an adjective. He had waited a long time for this special December. Now that it was almost upon him, he wasn't frightened, but he was eager, he decided. He was eager for it to come. And he was excited, certainly. All of the 11s were excited about the event that would be coming so soon. But there was a little shudder of nervousness when he thought about it, about what might happen. Apprehensive, Jonas decided. That's what I am. And we're going to stop there for today. In your journals, I want you to record the name Jonas, Asher, Lily, and his parents. And if you remember anything about any of these characters, go ahead and write it in there. And tomorrow we're going to go over what exactly those characters are, and maybe we'll learn some more from the book when we read again tomorrow. I also want you, in your journals, to write what you think Jonas is thinking about. What does he mean when he's excited for December? What do you think is going to happen in December? So write about it, and then we're going to talk about it again tomorrow. So we'll catch up with that tomorrow. Go write in your journals.